Good morning, folks. Welcome to our episode of PPOA Podcast. And we are really excited today. We have today with us Sandra Croxton. She serves as Justice Deputy for Supervisor Kathryn Barger, who is supervisor for our 5th district. So welcome, Sandra.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Sandra, can you explain kind of your role? Like, what is Justice Deputy? What do you do?
That's a really great question because oftentimes people come to us not knowing what we do. So the role of a justice deputy in a supervisor's office is to advise the supervisor on public safety policy and make recommendations to her on, based on her priorities, based on what's best for the community and based on how we, see the landscape of, public safety in the county.
Okay. And how did you get come to be her justice deputy?
I always say that public safety found me. I didn't find public safety. I come from a public policy background, and when I went to college, my focus was on higher education and student attainment, which is a different world than what I'm doing now, but it's policy nonetheless. And I really grew a passion for it, as a field deputy when I joined her office and interacting with community, but also our local, sheriff's station, and understood the work that they were doing for the community. And that's how I feel like I grew sort of the passion and understanding of what a deputy does in our county. And now I'm here, advising the supervisor on what's, recommendations to make when it comes to public safety in general.
And how long have you been with Supervisor Barger?
Officially 8 years.
Okay.
And 3 years as her justice deputy.
And then regarding Supervisor Barger, I know this is her last term, is that correct? And
yes.
She's done 3 terms.
That's right.
And so could you kind of give us kind of a description of the things she's accomplished, things she's prioritized?
The supervisor, has been with the county for over 30 years. She was the former, health deputy for Supervisor Antonovich. So to say that she has a passion for health policy is, an understatement. And that's something that she's carried with her in her current term as supervisor. She also emphasizes on children's services, especially children's safety. She has a huge passion for foster youth and, bringing services to them to make sure they're successful beyond, the care the county provides. Public safety is another priority of hers. She has never shied away from her support for law enforcement and all that entails. Now, of course, we have, shifted to fire recovery, given the incident that we experienced through the Eaton fire. That's another priority that will take us through the end of her term.
Talk about the fires. So the 5th district, can you kind of geographically, where's that located?
Yeah, so we are actually the largest geographical supervisorial district in the county. You're right, every supervisor serves roughly about 2 million residents, but ours is the largest geographically, encompassing what I like to call the I-210 corridor, where you have a lot of the foothill cities going out to Santa Clarita. You cover portions of Universal Studios and portions of the city of Los Angeles, and then go straight to the Antelope Valley in North County.
Okay. And then with regard to Supervisor Barger, currently, what are some of her priorities?
Yeah, the fires are, something that, nobody expected to come. They are going to be, like I said, a priority for her as she finishes her term as supervisor. But aside from that, and also equally important, is her emphasis on public safety. That hasn't wavered from the very beginning when she entered, her role as supervisor. She has always maintained that as, one of her major policy priorities, which is ensuring that, law enforcement, both, sheriff, non-sheriff, have resources that they need to make sure our communities are safe. And it's more important now than ever because we know we have a lot of major events coming to our county where it's going to be, crucial to have, the necessary resources on the ground to ensure the safety of not only residents, but also visitors. But I think she has also maintained her focus on child welfare, like I mentioned before. In her prior hat as children deputy, she, like I said, has focused a lot on foster youth. And the other one, the major one, is mental health. She has been an advocate about changing the definition of what it means to be gravely disabled, because that opens the door to the adequate resources for those who are mentally ill and possibly on the street because of it.
Okay. And then kind of segueing into public safety, members may not feel that it's prioritized. What would you say to that?
I would say that I can't speak for the other offices, but in our office, my supervisor, that has never been not one of her top priorities, right? She has maintained that focus of, public safety is an important aspect of quality of life. What can we do to ensure that, there's deputy wellness, that there is good morale in the department? And that's been something that she has maintained straight. This is why you see some of your members may encounter her in, a random visit to a station where she's asking, how are you doing today? She is, actively trying to talk to the members about what do you need to do your job, right? How can we be of help to you?
That's good to hear, because our members, there's so many challenges that we have. But when you talk about priorities for public safety, so what would you say to when an individual says, well, I understand you're prioritizing public safety and these other types of things, but it actually appears as though other things may be priorities.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair sentiment. We have heard that also from residents who feel like they don't have enough, deputy personnel on the street, especially when, they perceive crime increasing, right? It's a very real fear. It's a very real ask for residents. Our office is constantly receiving that feedback from our residents where they want more law enforcement in their communities, and they fear that the Board of Supervisors is curtailing, some of those employment opportunities, which is not actually true. We often have to clarify to the community that from a budgetary standpoint, the Sheriff's Department has not been curtailed or gone through a curtailment exercise like many of the other departments have at this point, which has cut, a lot of services, like Parks After Dark, for example, is one of those that has been, curtailed because of the budgetary situation that our county finds itself in. The Sheriff's Department did not have to go through that exercise. They have, academies that they're continuing to fill with recruitment. We know that's been on a positive trend, not probably where it needs to be, but it's showing good signs of people having interest in becoming a sheriff's deputy.
Okay. And I know you kind of touched on staffing levels, and now just kind of segueing specifically to the Sheriff's Department. As you know, our biggest issues involve vacancies, retaining our members, critical staffing shortages. What's your office's approach to those things?
So a few years ago, the supervisor commissioned a report that looked at, academy classes, which led to an increase in the number of county classes that were being supported by the board each year. We know that academy classes and recruitment is not going to solve, the staffing crisis in the Sheriff's Department alone. Retention is a huge factor of that, right? If we are bringing people in, but we can't, keep them in the department, that's sort of a wash. It's not really increasing or bringing the staffing levels to what we call equilibrium, right? Where it's healthy enough to ensure that we don't have restrictions on expansion of especially mental evaluation teams, for example, which are really popular because of the great work that they do, or Host. Host is another, entity within the department that is very valued because of the work that they do with homeless and the compassion that they show towards the population, right? So one of the things that our office has been focusing on is what can we do as partners from a supervisor standpoint to collaborate with the Sheriff's Department to ensure that not only are we recruiting, but also retaining personnel. And whatever we can do, whether it's supporting with deputy wellness, morale, the supervisor is willing to do, whatever is necessary to make sure that is happening.
Yeah, and I spoke at the Board of Supervisors meeting a few weeks ago, and I highlighted that, nationally, across the board, law enforcement, staffing levels are actually starting to increase, specifically after COVID. What would you say, for here in LA County, what would you say are some of the issues that maybe impact those things? Why do we have it different than the rest of the nation?
I think sometimes communities, or what we see in the media, is highlighting the bad, right? And I've always told this to any one of the captains that serves in the 5th district is we need to focus on the good things that the department does, because there's little things that happen every day, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, some of your members don't consider some of the things that they do positive as heroic acts. And I think that has to change, because they need to show to the community that everything that they do is something positive that they bring to the community that is not always seen.
And kind of going back to, talking about budgetary priorities, I know this current administration federally, there's a likely impact of federal money trickling down to the county level. Can you explain what what the county anticipates, what are their strategies around that or through it?
So the supervisor has been invested in understanding from, our county leadership, are we prepared? A lot of our departments receive federal grants that support a lot of operation. In the Sheriff's Department, it likely comes in the matter of federal task forces that involve joint efforts between a federal agency and, maybe a bureau within your department. And that's, in danger of maybe not happening in the future because there may be strings attached to that funding that make it impossible for us to enter into a partnership. That is something that we're definitely keeping an eye on, especially as we enter the next grant year, which would be next year.
Right. Moving into the future, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to be coming up on some major global events such as the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the World Cup. Are we prepared from the supervisor standpoint?
I think we will be prepared.
Okay.
Is what I would say to that. I think, there's a lot of work to be done. These events are right around the corner. I mean, we start, I think, in 26 and then 27, and it's 3 years straight.
Next year.
Yeah. So I think, that's been one of the supervisor's biggest questions, especially after the Paris Olympics ended, is, we're next. And we don't have a huge runway of being prepared. She's confident that the Sheriff's Department is actively collaborating with LA28 and the other entities to ensure that we do have the proper, public safety resources on the ground to ensure the safety of both visitors and residents. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think that's going to involve collaboration from agencies outside of the Sheriff's Department in order to accomplish.
I agree with you to the extent that about a couple of weeks ago, I attended a public safety forum of a lot of local agencies and how we're going to coordinate together with mutual aid, with LA rigs, because communication is going to be a big factor. In LA, unlike Paris or other cities, we're pretty spread out, and public transportation it has its challenges. But there's a lot coming up in the future for us. Yeah. And then I guess kind of a side question: what would you say in terms of what's something fun that kind of keeps you grounded or that most people don't know about you?
Well, I have a huge passion for sports. Okay. I love watching, you will come to my house on a weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and there's football on the television, whether it's college football or, professional football, we're watching some type of sport. And then when football's over, we switch to basketball. But one of the things that for me helps me sort of, get away from the mindset of work and brings me joy is I love to do puzzles.
Puzzles, okay.
Yeah, we have one where we went to the Grand Canyon and I brought a Grand Canyon puzzle and it's 1,000 pieces, finished it and framed it.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add about, working as Justice Deputy or anything you want to express regarding Supervisor Barger?
Actually to you and your membership, just, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do every day to, support our county. It can be a thankless job, but just know that from our office's perspective, from my perspective, it doesn't go unnoticed.
Well, Sandra, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. And thanks for coming out. And we'll see you all next time on our next episode for PPOA Podcast. Have a great day.